All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I apologize for the late delay. We had multiple computers crashing on our end, so it's always something with technology, but so happy that everyone could join us here today. We'll go ahead and give everyone a couple of seconds to join. If you need to go grab some water, go grab a snack, feel free to do that. But we'll get started in about a minute or so. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. Again, I want to give a quick apology for the delayed start. We had some technical issues on our end, but seems like everything is running smoothly. So really excited to be here with everyone today and talk about scheduling for equitable course access, a topic that we're really passionate about here at CourseDog. While we get started, would love to hear where everyone is joining us from today. So if you want to go in the chat, tell us what institution you're at, where in the country you are right now. Always love seeing where folks are coming from. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Let's do a brief round of introductions before we get into things. So hi, everyone. My name is Bridget Moran. I'm our content manager here at CourseDog, so involved in all things research and content related. I spent a lot of my time here focusing on how we can make scheduling more student-centric, specifically for all types of students at your institution. So really looking forward to chatting about this, and I'll hand it over to Mara now to go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mara. I've been at CourseDog a little over 3 years now. When I first joined, I had the opportunity as a project manager to work directly with institutions of all different types, implementing the scheduling, really diving deep into institutional specific business processes, and helping to implement best practices for student-centric scheduling. The last year or so, I've been a product manager full-time, owning scheduling and academic operations analytics, which I think is very close to our mission to remove barriers to success for students. So really looking forward to today's conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Mara. And I know someone typed in that the chat is disabled, so we're currently working on it, getting that back up. So thank you for bearing with us. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and dive into things, and want to quickly go over what we'll be chatting about during today's session today. So we're first going to begin today by looking at what some of the research tells us about the connection between scheduling and student success. Next, we'll talk about what some of those common scheduling challenges are that many institutions face and how students are impacted by these challenges. And specifically, we'll spend some of our time talking about how our most underserved students are particularly impacted by scheduling practices that don't meet their needs. Finally, we'll talk about some practices that you all can hopefully implement to help ensure that students on your campus have equitable access to the courses they need. So we'll go through some tactics on how to solicit student feedback, use data to inform your schedule, and what role technology plays in all of this. And of course, we'll leave time at the end for questions. But if you have any questions that come up during today's conversation, please feel free to put those in the Q&A function or in the chat. I believe that's back up now, and you can find those at the bottom of your screen. One last thing I want to flag here, we'll also be doing a few polls throughout today's session. Always love hearing what you all are working on at your institutions and get your thoughts there, so definitely looking forward to that. And the final thing I'll note is we will be sending out a recording of this presentation and the deck afterwards. So if you want to share it with anyone, or if you have to jump midway through, no worries. We will be sending that out to everyone. Okay, so as we mentioned during our introductions, Mara and I spend a lot of time talking to folks across higher ed about their scheduling practices and the pain points that they experience. And I highlighted just a couple of common themes that we often hear from folks here. And these are from institutions of all shapes and sizes. And one of the common themes that really comes through in our conversations is that current scheduling practices really aren't working for students. And this may be not having enough courses or sections available for students, or maybe some of those courses have overlapping times. Other times, students might not know how they can actually get into the courses they need. And of course, I'm sure that you all have lots of other thoughts here. This is really just a small sampling of what we hear. And these problems certainly aren't unique to all of us that are on the line right now. I think some people might say, maybe dramatic, maybe not, but there's a crisis when we think about this, and students are feeling the effects of it. I think it's no secret to anyone here that a significant number of students aren't enrolled in enough credits to finish their degree on time. The first 15 to Finish campaign launched over 10 years ago at this point, with the aim of encouraging students to enroll in 15 credits in their first semester to stay on track for on-time completion. And while it might seem obvious to us that students need to take 15 credits a term to finish on time, many students aren't actually aware of this. 15 to Finish campaigns across the country have shown strong results, but we know that there's still work to be done. The data here demonstrates just how far we still have to go. Across the board, students aren't taking enough credits to finish their degrees on time. And while there are definitely some variations across institutional segments, I think we can agree that we all have our work cut out here. On the left, the average credit hours taken by all students in their first year paints an alarming picture. However, on the right, we see an even more concerning picture if you look at the number of credit hours taken by Pell Grant students in their first year. If you look at the comparisons at four-year institutions, excluding those research institutions, 31% of all students take 30 credits in their first year, while just 26% of Pell Grant students at those same institutions take 30 credits in their first year. The disparity is actually even greater if you look at those four-year institutions with the highest research designation. At those institutions, 45% of all students take 30 credits in their first year, compared to just 36% of their Pell Grant peers. This is concerning for a number of reasons, but I think first and foremost, we have to think about what's the toll that this takes on students. The data you'll see on this slide is from studies that were done within the University System of Georgia. The data shows the percentage of students at state universities in Georgia that graduated within 6 years based on the number of credits taken in their first semester. The numbers are pretty startling when you look at them. While 54% of students that took 15 or more credits in their first semester graduated within 6 years, only 43% of their peers that took 12 to 14 credits graduated in the same period. And just 22% of those that took 7 to 11 hours in their first semester graduated within 6 years. And we know this trend isn't unique to Georgia. We've looked at lots of other research out there, and one of the other studies I came across was done in Tennessee. And this showed that community college students taking 15 or more credits in their first semester were 6.4% more likely to graduate, controlling for other factors. So if we know that the number of credits that students take in their first year have such a large impact on their ability to graduate, then why aren't more students taking a full load in their first term and in their first year? I think it's important to note here that just like all the other problems we're tackling in higher ed, we know that there isn't just one root cause to this problem. Many students don't even know what counts as a full load. While students need to take 15 credits a semester to graduate on time, federal financial aid only requires students to take 12 credits a semester to maintain their full-time status. This may mislead some students into thinking that taking 12 credits a semester will get them where they need to be. We also know that external factors influence students' decisions to take a full load or not. Family, friends, or perhaps even in some cases advisors may counsel students to quote unquote ease into their college career. What they don't know is that studies have shown that students taking 15 credits in their first semester don't fare any worse than their counterparts taking fewer credits. And some studies have even shown that students are more likely to earn better grades if they take a full load in their first year. Of course, many of our students also juggle commitments outside of their studies, whether this is being a caregiver, an employee, or balancing various other commitments. But where we'll be focusing our time today is course accessibility. If students can't access the courses they need, they won't be able to take enough credits to stay on track for on-time completion. And I think this quote here on the right by Dr. Tristan Dunley really sums this up well. He told us that oftentimes students aren't able to take the classes they need because of the way we created the schedule. And Dr. Dunley isn't the only person who's told us this. I love this quote here on the side by one of our partners, Dr. Casey Bullock at Weber State University. He noted that, it's often easy to say that students aren't following their plan or they're not following the process, but we really have to investigate what we're doing and asking ourselves, are we making it more difficult for students to get through? And how often are we creating these roadblocks? These are exactly the same types of questions we've been asking ourselves. So, how can we make it easier for them to access the courses they need at the times that work for them, taking into account, all the various commitments that they have. And while, of course, talking to folks in the field helps give us this perspective, we also see that there's data that shows there's definitely some room for improvement here. Just a few months ago, actually, we partnered with ACRO to conduct a comprehensive survey on course scheduling. And of about the 340 plus institutions that responded to the survey, only 27% agreed that their institution engages in student-centric scheduling. This means that almost 3 out of 4 institutions either disagrees or can't really fully say that they conduct student-centric scheduling. So let's take a look at why student-centric scheduling isn't happening and what some of those ramifications are. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Mara now.
Thanks, Bridget. So we're going to spend the next portion of our session discussing how scheduling practices actually create barriers for students. And then we're also going to specifically look at how some of our most underserved students aren't being served by current scheduling practices. So I'm sure many of these errors laid out on this slide resonate with a lot of the folks that are on the webinar today. Class conflicts come up in almost every conversation that I have with academic administrators when we're discussing their scheduling challenges. Scheduling staff often spend numerous hours coordinating the schedules that they receive from multiple academic units and then entering this information into the SIS manually. They often don't have the time or capability to audit if all of the co-recs or prereqs for each academic program are scheduled at different times. And then inevitably, some of these courses slip through the cracks and are scheduled at the same time. Once the schedule goes live, students notify administrators of the conflict, who then must either move or cancel the conflicting courses. Students planning to take or are already registered for the competing courses are then left scrambling to find a new section or course that works with their schedule and that will actually keep them on track to graduate. The next 2 scheduling errors are perhaps less common, but also have an outsized impact on the students that are impacted by them. For dual grading, students may sign up for a class that they are not as strong in, thinking that they'll be able to take it, pass, or fail. However, due to an error in how the class was actually advertised, they found out only after registering that they must take the class for a grade. Finding out this information after registering for their courses can completely throw students off and give them little time to react and readjust their schedule. Similarly, errors related to variable unit classes add an unnecessary burden on students to quickly determine how they'll be able to take enough credits to stay on track and maintain their financial aid. So we know from talking to our partners that inefficiencies in the course scheduling process will ultimately lengthen time to completion, but what does this actually look like across the sector? We recently partnered with University Business to conduct a survey on academic operations and look into how inefficiencies impact students. From the over 220 responses that we got, 65% of the respondents said that course scheduling issues either significantly or somewhat impact students' time to completion. And this is pretty staggering. So we know that scheduling errors impact students, but there are also other factors at play when creating the course schedule. In the same ACRO survey that Bridget mentioned a few slides ago, we asked institutions about the top factors they considered when creating the course schedule. You'll see that the schedule from the previous term, faculty availability, and faculty preferences were the top 3 factors. Specifically not in the top 3 is student need or other student-related metrics, such as projected new student enrollment, number of students waitlisted for a course, student ability to attend class when it is offered, and others. So what happens, though, when faculty preferences are put first and student needs aren't closely examined? The student complaints highlighted on this slide show what happens when schedules aren't based on student needs and neglect to look at the data. Schedules are created from scratch each year based on the guesses and preferences of academic departments, or schedules are rolled from one year to the next with little insight into how student demand is changing across time. I was talking with one university registrar, and they told me that even if student preferences aren't changing, oftentimes the schedule being rolled over never completely met student needs in the first place. In their words, we roll over schedules, but we just roll over problems. The same courses don't offer enough sections each year, and students wonder why they aren't able to enroll in them. Or classes aren't offered at times that work for a majority of students' schedules. Students with jobs or caretaking responsibilities often also have different times that what's available to them. I'm sure some of you have heard these complaints from students and could add your own to this list as well. So while course accessibility challenges impact all students, we know they have an outsized impact on the most underserved student populations. We could probably talk about this slide all day long, so I'll just go over a couple of examples. I know many administrators are worried about employed students being able to access the courses they need while also balancing their jobs. Will these students be able to take all the courses they need either before or after they go to work? These students often can't afford to be on campus all day and have their classes spread out over 7 or 8 hours. Other students are disproportionately impacted by scheduling errors. For example, if 2 required courses are accidentally scheduled at the same time, students are forced to choose between courses and as a result may not take a full load. This can impact students that need to maintain a certain load to qualify for their financial aid. Similarly, if a course with variable units is incorrectly marked, students may find out only after they registered for the course that they actually won't receive the number of credits that they actually expected. While these errors may not happen often, when they do, it can have large ramifications for our underserved students. I also know this slide doesn't even cover all of the various student groups that we could talk about when it comes to course access. I've also talked with administrators that are concerned about course access for transfer students, students that commute home on the weekends, gap year students, student athletes, and the list goes on. So we just spent some time talking about how different groups of students can be impacted by a schedule that isn't created with their needs in mind. We'd love to actually go ahead and hear from you all about which groups of students on campus you're most worried about accessing the courses that they need. Please select which group of students you're most concerned about of the group shown here. And then if there's another group that we don't have listed here, go ahead and select other and type your answer into the chat. We've gone ahead and launched the poll and we'll leave it open for about 60 seconds or so.
And we just had someone make a great point in the chat that they're concerned about all of these students. I'm sure that many of you feel this way. So would love to hear, which students groups you're perhaps most concerned about or is currently top of mind for you when you're thinking about your scheduling practices. All right, well, it looks like we have the poll results published for everyone to see here. Super interesting to see what everyone selected here. It looks like employed students came out as the top one. Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense to us. Low income students, another one that really rose to the top here. If anyone has any commentary on why they selected their answer choice, would love for you to drop that in the chat. Mara, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely really interesting and definitely resonates with a lot of what I discuss with customers when we're actually implementing the software. And I think there are a lot of different features in CourseDog, which we'll definitely get into, which enables institutions to think specifically about serving these student groups, but absolutely understand the concern for wanting to meet the needs of all of those listed on the screen.
And we just had a chat come in through here from Kimberly, who noted that students with double majors and only one section of courses that they need to take are offered at the same time. Yeah, I'm sure that resonates with a lot of folks here. Yes, those conflicting class times, that can be definitely a real barrier for students. All right. Well, we just talked about those, student groups that we're most concerned about. So wanted to dive into a couple of these student groups and maybe some considerations that we should be thinking about when we're actually going and creating the course schedule. So first off, students with children. We know that, of course, these students have a lot of time constraints when it comes to their caretaking responsibilities. And oftentimes they need to be able to complete their courses during school hours. So institutions with large populations of students with children should consider questions such as, how far away are local K through 12 schools from your campus? What times are those schools in session? And do those schools or other local organizations offer childcare before and after school? For example, I was recently talking with one community college administrator, and she was telling me that many of their students have children that go to local schools. And in order to accommodate this large population of students, they're actually going and introducing scheduling bands that allow students to take all the classes they need between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. After their classes finish up at 2 p.m., they'll then have enough time to pick up their kids from school. Next, moving on to employed students. I know this rose to the top of our poll. Of course, they also have a lot of time constraints that they have to deal with when they're taking their classes. So I think it's really important for institutions to examine, what types of industries are their students working in? Who are those major employers in the industries in the local community? And what are typical hours of operation? So for example, if students commonly work in retail and hospitality, these industries typically need more workers in the afternoons and evenings. Next, how are students that rely on public transportation able to access courses? Do courses begin, say, before the first bus arrives? Or do courses end after the last public transportation option leaves? And say that there is a bus at night, but what if it doesn't arrive frequently? Will those students have a safe place to wait after their course ends? And finally, low-income students. I know this was another group that it seemed like folks were particularly concerned about. I think it's really important to think holistically when it comes to how course access and timing also relates to other student services that students rely on. So for example, can students easily access tutoring services or technology labs before or after scheduled classes? Will cafeterias or food carts be open or near where the courses are offered? I know we could probably talk about this for the entire hour, but I now want to move on and talk about some of the practices that we can implement to actually help meet these needs. So for the last portion of today's session, we're going to talk about how to solicit student feedback, use data to inform your schedule, and what role technology plays in all of this. So lots to talk about here, so let's go ahead and dive in. And as I mentioned, I've spent a lot of time interviewing academic administrators, and in these conversations, I always like to ask if they have a method of collecting student feedback whenever a student comes to them about a scheduling challenge that they are having. And most administrators told me that they heard anecdotal feedback, but didn't have a central place for storing student scheduling requests. However, I did speak with one institution that implemented, at least in my eyes, a pretty easy solution for collecting student feedback. And I really love this practice because I think that it's something that can be implemented fairly easily. This institution created an online shareable spreadsheet that deans, course schedulers, advisors, and student success coaches can access. And whenever a student came to one of these individuals with a class issue or request, they noted it in the spreadsheet for everyone to see. Deans can view the spreadsheet and see once a critical mass of requests are recorded. Based on these documented requests, they can then go ahead and add sections to meet student demand, as of course capacity and resources allow. If the dean decides to open up a new course or section, they'll then email the advisors and let them know about the class opening to pass along to those affected students. This may seem like a pretty simple process, but it really can have a big impact. At the institution I spoke with, they were able to open up 17 new classes as a result of this tracking. This isn't only a huge win for the students that would have otherwise been unable to take these classes, but also an additional source of tuition revenue for the institution. This is just one way to track student preferences, but there are also some more proactive ways to solicit student feedback as well. While institutions frequently survey students on a variety of topics, I think that course scheduling is rarely one of those. However, these questions can yield helpful insights for creating the course schedule. The areas listed on the left, modality, time of day, and day of week, these preferences are all definitely important. But I think, at least to me, the topics on the right side are just as important. Institutions should seek how to understand how different student groups are impacted by course access and ask demographic questions such as about their enrollment status, the campus they attend, and the goal of their studies. Surveys are also a great way to gather feedback about barriers to course access, both at the institutional and personal level. Are students unable to access courses because the courses they need are always full or maybe not offered at a time that works for their schedules? On a more personal level, we also know that our students are dealing with a lot of other things in their lives. This may be childcare, work, or transportation challenges that impact when and how they're able to access the courses they need. I would like to caveat this now. I know that we do want to be wary of over-surveying our students. I know, particularly during the pandemic, it felt like there was a survey going out every week. So definitely something that we want to be intentional about and thinking about how we can perhaps incorporate that into, other surveys that are related to your scheduling. So I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Mara now to talk about some of the data sources we can look at.
Thanks, Bridget. So we've also talked about the role of data in course scheduling. Last year, we conducted a survey with University Business, and we asked about the role of data specifically in the course scheduling and planning process. So the good news is that the majority of institutions are using data to some extent to inform their course scheduling processes. However, almost half of the institutions that we surveyed reported that they somewhat use data in the course scheduling process. This is somewhat puzzling because in an age of information overload, why aren't we using all of the information that we have at our fingertips to create truly student-optimized scheduling? So let's take a look at some of the data points that we've identified that can help create a student-centric schedule. Historically, there's always been a bit of guesswork when it comes to creating the course schedule. As we mentioned previously, the ACRA survey found that faculty availability and faculty preference were the two top factors when beginning a new scheduling cycle. Using these factors to create the course schedule means the schedule is more centered on faculty needs than it is on student needs. Additionally, looking at data from previous term schedules gives an incomplete picture of how student demand may be changing or how it may not have ever even been met. We think that there's a huge opportunity for many institutions to leverage data here. Looking at degree planning data from student education plans can help institutions see into the future and assess which courses students plan to take and in what terms. It can also help scheduling teams see which courses are critical for a student to complete their program versus which courses may have some wiggle room for scheduling. There are also a few other metrics to keep in mind. There's so much data we can use to help us build a schedule that puts student needs first. We've listed out a few more metrics here. First, course distribution throughout the day and week. I'm sure you've all experienced pain points here. Classes are packed between 10 and 2, and faculty may be reluctant to teach outside of these hours, even if this is when students need to take their courses. I was talking with one administrator, and she told me that a student working in her office told her she couldn't work on Tuesday and Thursday. When she asked why, the student said all the classes they needed to take were only offered on those days and were jam-packed in classes all day long. Course distribution is also important in the context of program maps. For example, if a student signs up for a program with the expectation that they will take classes at night, all of the courses need to be offered at night as they progress. They shouldn't complete 2 terms and then only find out as they attempt to register for the 3rd term that none of the classes they need are offered at night. Course and section fill rates is another important metric to examine. Particularly in popular general education courses or milestone courses, institutions should look to see if all the sections offered are consistently at capacity. This may be an indication that not all students are able to access these courses when they need to. I won't go over each individual data point here, but the questions listed on this slide are a good starting point to see if students can indeed access all of the courses they need as they progress. Now that we've discussed some of the important data points institutions should use when creating their course schedule, I'd love to learn from you all what data you use to inform your course schedule. Please select all of the data points that your institution uses during the scheduling process. If we missed any key data points here, please feel free to drop them into the chat. So similar to last time, we'll leave the poll open for about 60 seconds or so. Awesome. So if you haven't had a chance to submit your response yet, let's go ahead and do that now.
All right, looks like we have the poll results shared here now. Love to see these results. Looks like almost everyone is using some mix of these data points. Looks like just 3% here said none of the above. So it looks like some of the more popular answers were enrollment at program and course level. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Course and section fill rates, course distribution throughout the day and week. Mara, I know that you spend a lot of time thinking about scheduling metrics. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so this is definitely very interesting, but not surprising. I've worked with a lot of different institutions to really look at the ways they currently are leveraging data, which oftentimes revolves around historical enrollment trends, and then also looking at real-time fill rates to make last-minute adjustments. I definitely think that that is more than a great place to start. And then definitely some of the other data points are just additional layers to help improve that accuracy and move closer to student-centric scheduling.
Awesome. And for some of these data points that, not as many folks said they're using, like data from student created degree plans or time to completion by academic programs or by student segments, would love for you all to chat in and perhaps hear, why you aren't using those student data points. Do you think it's not helpful, or do you have trouble accessing them at your institution? Would love to have a discussion about that as well. All right, well, we'll also have time for Q&A later too, if any other comments come up. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Awesome. So using data to inform the course scheduling process is just one tool that we can use for promoting course accessibility. We can also create and promote scheduling policies to ensure certain detrimental scheduling practices aren't even allowed in the first place. First, one of the things that we always work with our partners on is building out and enforcing standard meeting patterns. These ensure that all courses adhere to a standard set of times so that courses aren't offered during overlapping times that could create conflicts for students. And this also ensures that students don't have to choose between courses and helps to optimize the utilization of your space. Sometimes for classes with high demand, it makes sense to allocate seats for certain groups of students. For example, a certain number of seats or sections are reserved for first or second year students that may otherwise have been shut out of the courses due to later registration periods. You'll see there are many different scheduling policies to consider, but they all revolve around ensuring students can access the courses that they need to graduate on time. Whether this is making sure they are offered at the appropriate time of day or putting in place rules to ensure co-rec and pre-rec courses aren't offered at the same time. So with all of that being said, I'd love to quickly cover how CourseDog can help your institution create a student-centric schedule. So the platform really does empower academic administrators to support on-time completions and operational excellence with integrated academic and event scheduling, course demand projections, curriculum management, and online catalog solutions through a single bidirectional integration. One of the things that I often find our partners really like about CourseDog is that the system is highly configurable. So we do enable institutions to support their specific business processes, while also guiding and helping you to set up general best practices that oftentimes relate to exactly what we talked about today, which is student-centric scheduling. And then I shared this at the beginning, but in addition to being the product manager for scheduling, I'm also the product manager for our academic operations analytics platform. This is one of our newer solutions, and I'm extremely excited about it and passionate about it because I do think it really gets to the heart of our mission, which is to remove barriers to success for students. So scheduling analytics really uncovers hidden insights for institutions to get you out of not necessarily the habit of just blindly rolling the course schedule from one term to the next, but really intentionally looking at that and identifying based on like student audit data and pathway to degree, what seats and sections are necessary to be offering to meet that student demand. And then also really helpful is that it works directly with our scheduling software to ensure that we're recommending, and also we can enforce that the times that you're offering and scheduling those sections are not going to conflict with one another based on student specific needs. And then additionally, we're really investing in curriculum analytics as well, which helps institutions to build clear pathways and make decisions that ensure their curriculum is financially sustainable.
Awesome. Thanks, Mara. Well, I think we have covered a lot in the 40 minutes or so that we've been here. So I want to open it up to everyone now for Q&A. So feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A function or the chat function, and we'll try to get to those.
So while we're capturing responses, I could definitely take that question from Helen. So that's a great question, Helen, asking how distance education figures into students in these categories. Personally, I was a project manager and worked directly with a lot of institutions when we were first experienced the impact of COVID. So of course, many institutions had to remove and move away from a completely on-campus learning model to more distance education. And I know that is the preferred route for a lot of students. And typically what we'll do is we'll just have conversations because I know distance education can either be live streaming classes or it could be recorded. And so I think that is a really important distinction as to whether or not it's going to create conflict likelihoods for students. If it is the former, we very much still recommend the same types of incorporation of data and looking at students that are likely to be taking the class so that you can schedule at a time that they're more likely to actually be able to take it. And so I'd say there are a lot of similarities to scheduling distance education in the same way that you would schedule on-campus learning.
And Mara, it looks like we have a question here about waitlist management and if that's a function that we have in our tool.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Joseph. So waitlist management, we are able to see real-time enrollment numbers, and for course demand projections, we actually do take into account historical waitlist data, which is essentially, we would say, a proxy for historical demand and how students would, if the class was large enough, they would have taken it. And so we are able to factor that into our recommendations for this number of sections and number of seats that schools should be offering. Today, we don't actually manage like letting students off the waitlist. That wouldn't be in CourseDog, but waitlist management is a really important part, I'd say, of accurately projecting demand in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Mara. I see we also have a question in here about finding a current list of clients that currently use our software. You can certainly find many of those on our website at CourseDog.com, but we can also reach out to you to give you more information about that. So if anyone else has the same question, please let us know and we're happy to share more. All right, any other questions, please feel free to keep them coming in. Mara, one question that I would love to pick your brain on, I know that we've talked about, a lot of the various data points that institutions can use for scheduling. What are some of the data points you see are the biggest opportunity for institutions to use to really help, create that student-centric schedule?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So as I shared, I'd say a lot of institutions today really do use historical enrollment trends. And I'd say that's a piece of the puzzle and a really important piece of the puzzle. But I think what really helps us to move in the direction of uncovering hidden insights is also looking at audit data. So being able to pull together actual program maps that an institution may have, or inferred program maps, which our software helps you to create by looking historically how students have actually progressed towards their degree. And then looking at your current student population on campus and comparing their completed credits to those pathways, we're actually able to blend that data with the historical enrollment projections to predict what your students on the ground are going to be taking. And so I think that uncovering that piece of the puzzle with the audit data is really important, and another way to just continue to use the data that we have access to as a tool to build student-centric schedules.
Awesome. Thanks, Mara. All right, I think we have a couple of folks that have their hand raised here to ask some questions. I think Brandon, I see you have your hand raised, so we can go ahead and unmute you if you want to ask that question live. Yeah, so if you want to unmute yourself, the little red microphone, you should be able to ask. All right, I don't think that we're able to hear you, Brandon, but please feel free to put that question into the chat and we can answer it or follow up later. All right, well, I think we have gotten to all of our questions. So we are finishing a little early, which is always great to give folks some time back. Before we leave, just want to launch one last final poll question here. To see if anyone is interested in learning more about our work here at CourseDog. A quick just yes, no poll here. We won't be sharing the results of that, just kind of for our own information so we can, reach out if you're interested in learning more. All right, well, once you've had a chance to fill out that final poll, thanks so much for joining us today, everyone. We really enjoyed this conversation, enjoyed the questions, the poll results that we had. So please don't hesitate to be in touch and enjoy these extra 15 minutes you have. Hopefully you can maybe take a quick walk, grab a snack before your next meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.